Hello, folks, and welcome to Author Adjacent, a show about the journey from hobbyist writer to professional author. I'm your host, Michael Vadney, and today we have two-time returning guest, Joseph John Lee, who is the author of the Spellbinders and Gunslinger trilogy and the Dragons of Nora series. Welcome back to the show once more.
Hi, thanks for having me again, Michael. It's always a pleasure to be here.
It feels like we were just talking to each other, so lovely.
What they don't need to know is we were.
Shocker, plot twist. Put in the suspenseful music. But anyways, today we actually have a specific subject in mind that we kind of wanted to dig into. You made the suggestion for this one, and you have my immediate buy-in. It is a great one. We're going to talk about Magnum Opuses, which is not pluraled as Magnum Opus, and we're both upset about it, but we're going to move on from that egregious error of the English Latin language.
I feel like I've been betrayed by the English language yet again.
Yeah, absolutely. First question I actually think we should start with this is, how would you define a magnum opus in the context of a writing career?
Yeah, I think a magnum opus, like obviously the term magnum opus is like, it means like what, like grand project or whatever it is. Like a life's work or something like that. A passion project, something that you have felt so passionately about that you just want so much to tackle that. Like some like examples that I would think of, obviously like Song of Ice and Fire, that'd be like George R. Martin's magnum opus. Like that's like obviously planned to be 7-book series. He already has 5 of them out, as we all know. Like Brandon Sanderson, Stormlight Archive. That's like 5 books into a 10-book series. That's definitely a magnum opus. Things that are like multiple series in like one big interconnected world, like Robin Hobb's Realm of the Elderlings, because that's like what, 5 individual series that are all just telling one kind of continuous arc, magnum opus. So you're thinking something that like grand in scope, like a bit, like a huge, like in terms of like fantasy books, like huge world, a lot of a lot of different interconnecting plot threads, things that require a shitload of planning and a shitload of execution.
So it sounds like two things that are absolutely required for a magnum opus then is scope and complexity, like scale.
I'd say something to that effect, yeah.
Okay. So I think I would also add to that impact. Because there have definitely been very ambitious projects that aren't considered magnum opus of that author. But if it has both those things and it has a profound impact on their audience, I think that's like a key missing ingredient. Because like a big part of why we read is the emotional impact that the stories have on us. So I think you need that as well to be considered a magnum opus.
Yeah, I'd agree with that as well, because something can have like that massive scope, but if it doesn't resonate at all, then it it's kind of, it might be failing what it's setting out to do as well, right? But I think also it's a kind of like a personal definition in a way, because someone could set out to what they believe is their magnum opus. They could even just be writing it for themselves, right? So it may not necessarily go to a massive audience. Like their audience could just be one, and it's themselves. So I think something that someone has waited a long time or spent a long time working on, in a sense all its own, I think that's worthy of consideration for the definition too. Who are we to judge, though? We're just 2 guys on the internet.
That is true, but we're here, so we might as well talk about it.
Yeah, we're the authorities on this matter, and we'll accept no other arguments.
Exactly. Thank you, viewer, for validating us. So it sounds like it's up to the author then to really pick the magnum opus, but then there's also some feedback from the reader as well. I don't think you can really have your readers pick your otis opus, not otis, magnum opus. uh they can have input, they can validate that choice, but it seems like it is up to the author to really pick, like, I've written all of these stories, and this one book or this collection of books is the one that is my pinnacle.
Yeah, I I think there's validity in that. Like going back to George R. R. Martin for a minute, I don't think that he would say like Fever Dream or Armageddon Rag were his magnum opuses at all.
Hmm.
And it's like it was like once he started on A Song of Ice and Fire, that was it right there.
Hmm.
And yeah, but I mean, who knows? Like someone might think that Fever Dream is his magnum opus. Who are we to judge? I mean, they're probably wrong, but
Yeah, it definitely seems like it is a bit of a conversation between like the readers and the author to really pinpoint what that is. It's almost like you pick it as a society or approve it as like a sub society. But I'm not really sure about that. Identifying what makes an magnum opus is actually a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a very clear definition, but it seems like there's a lot of nuance to it.
like in all things, I mean, there's always nuance that yeah, like at first glance, you're like, oh, this is simple to define, and then you get into what we're doing, and we're 8 minutes into figuring out what a magnum opus actually is. But we're just going on vibes, aren't we?
A little bit. We've kind of drifted into more just beyond the definition of it, into like, how do you determine your magnum opus? Like, here, let's use you as an example, actually. Do you believe your current project, Herodotus, to be your magnum opus?
I would say yes, because so this is a story that I've had like the proto inklings of it in my head. I started originally thinking of this story when I was like 14, 15 years old. So that's
Wow.
like 19, 20 years ago. Like it started off as just, like shit, like most things are when you're 14. And, like a lot of it was just, superimposing lines of dialogue from whatever video game I was playing at the time, all that fun jazz. But it's a story that's still stuck with me, really in various forms ever since then. And as I got older, as my interests evolved, I went through university and grad school, and like I was constantly thinking about this story and wanting to put it down to paper. And then the more I thought about it, the larger the scope grew, the larger this world grew, the more detailed everything became, to the point that when I finally found myself in a position to write it, and I actually started writing another like proto version of it about 5 years ago. Got 70,000 words into like that initial draft before just scrapping it entirely, because I still didn't think that it was good enough for what I wanted it to be, what it needed to be. At that point, I wound up writing the Spellbinders and the Gunslingers trilogy, which very much was not like a magnum opus at all, so much as it was something that I felt I needed to write at the time. If anything, to just kind of season myself as a writer, because that was those were my first books that I published. There's no better way to teach yourself how to properly write than just throwing yourself into the fire and just writing
Absolutely.
something. But to write something of like the scale necessary to write, or write something of a large scale like that you could call a magnum opus, it's so difficult to just do that first shot and without any experience. So I realized I needed that experience. And 5 years, 5 years removed from what I originally wrote, then I can see that, yeah, I was not ready at all, because what I was trying to do in the space of one book then, I am spreading across the first 3 books of what's going to be Project Herodotus now. I think where I stopped, 70K words in, I think probably another 15, 20,000 or so would put me at the end of where the first book of this new series is going to end.
Oh wow.
And this book is planned for like, 300,000 words or so. So it's, you kind of have to learn when you're ready for something like this too.
It sounds like you gave it a go and just felt like you just needed to cut your teeth on a few other books to kind of just get that experience. I actually have a very similar story. The book I'm writing right now, like my debut, it is not the first book I wanted to write. I've had this story in my head for a long time, but it is a complex story. I have talked about this before. I love time travel, especially time travel in fantasy, but they are complex stories in order to keep from like unraveling in your hands and not just going, oh, time travel fixed it. And that's never satisfying. I definitely relate to that where you're like, I want to do this, but I know I'm
Mm-hmm.
not ready yet. So that's why I started working on my debut instead.
When I stopped writing that first draft, like that original draft like 5 years ago, part of it was realizing, yeah, maybe I'm not ready for this. But part of it was also just the fact that I was suddenly consumed by the idea of what would eventually become the Spellbinder series. That I was like, okay, if I'm just going to be wallowing at how I'm not quite ready to write this massive book yet, I should just go on to this one thing that's like kind of taking over my thoughts right now, and then that's what I spent the next 2 years 2 years writing. Or actually, yeah, it was really over like 3 or 4 years because I took a year break in between. But yeah, it's knowing when to tackle something, when you need to season yourself, and when, like, even if you're 70,000 words in, knowing that it's probably better to scrap that whole thing, as much as that sucks to do, and just start over with fresh eyes later time.
So, how did you know you were ready to tackle Herodotus? Like, how did you know what? I've cut my teeth, I got my experience, I'm capable of doing this now.
One of the big things about the Spellbinders trilogy was proving to myself that I could write a trilogy first and foremost, and not just a trilogy, like a full completed series from start to finish. Because like at the time, just writing novels was still new to me. It was something that I always wanted to do, but I had never, like, up to that point, I had never written more than, I had written a couple novellas, and I had written like one standalone fantasy that was only cracked about like 95,000 words or so. But like actually tackling a series was something that I had never done. So I wanted to be able to prove to myself that I could do that. So wrote that whole trilogy, and then like after I kind of took a little bit of a mental break with the Dragons of Nora books, it was always something that I had planned to tackle after I had taken that break. And it was really once I finished writing Dragon Along last summer, like I passed off to my editor. I went to Scotland for Worldcon. Well, partially for Worldcon. I was also at a wedding, but potato potato. But like I was in Scotland. I was talking to people at Worldcon, and like it was then that like I knew for certain, okay, I'm ready to start outlining this, and let's see where it goes. So I spent like I normally my policy is outline every book before writing a single word. Herodotus is an 8-book series. Just the novels. I'm probably going to write some novellas in the world as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I got through the entirety of the first book, and about midway through the second book in the outline, and then I realized, okay, I need to write this now. Otherwise, I'm going to burn out before I even start.
Oh.
So 3 months of world building plus outlining one book and half of another. That'll definitely hit you. yeah, and it's at that point just like just kind of gently easing myself into it. So it was like that first month or so, it was slow going, maybe no more than like from like the end of November till around Christmas. I don't think I wrote more than like 10,000 words or so. But after that point, I mean, I'm at like 210,000 words on the project right now. So, and that's just in the 6 months since Christmas.
Wow.
So clearly, I was ready, willing, and able to get to that point. So it's knowing when to start is not something you can necessarily plan, other than saying I'm gonna try for this after I finish this series. But the actual urge and willingness to just like jump right into it was definitely a lot more excitement that I've had in quite a while to actually like start tackling something.
I think I saw recently you put an update online that you've completed part 4 and you have one more final part, but it's also the chunkiest part of the book.
Yeah, part 3 of 4.
Oh,
Yeah,
three
but
of
yeah,
four. Okay.
yeah, I was actually running numbers on like how long each individual section was, but also just like looking at my outline. I like part 3 of the book. It was like has the fewest chapters out of of any section,
Hmm.
but it also has the highest word count. And
You're falling back into that
I
habit.
yeah, but then part 4 it has probably like at least 12 more chapters than any other part, and that's where like all like the beefiest of the beefiest stuff happens like in part 4. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'm definitely cracking 300,000 words. I think we'll see.
It sounds like it based on the numbers updates that you've been given online and what you're anticipating. I definitely think you will. So
Yeah.
when working on Herodotus, like what is driving this vision? You've had this story that you wanted to tell for a very long time. Is it the theme that you feel passionate about, or is it the creative challenge that is compelling you to tackle this magnum opus?
I think it's a little of both. Like like the drive to like say that if anything, if nothing else, I attempted to do this. And now that I'm this far into it, I'm once I hit go on book one, like I'm sticking with it because Mama didn't raise no quitter. But also just like from a thematic perspective, it's like something that's really appealing to me because um, prior to this life as an author, I was very set on going into academia. I did grad school. I have 2 master's degrees. I had intended to go forward with a PhD, but I burnt out midway through my second master's degree and then just nixed that whole career plan. And it was during that time that I realized that like studying narratives and like immersing myself in narratives was what ultimately gave me so much more enjoyment. And but ever since then, um, like my degrees are in history. I don't really do anything with them in my day job,
Oh, okay. I would say in
other
your day
than
job, maybe, but it pops up in your books quite frequently.
yeah, I in my day job, they're mainly pieces of paper that allowed me to get my day job.
Mm.
But thematically with Herodotus, especially, like as like a trained historian, and this series is very much historically based in its approach, very academic in its approach. Something along those lines has been something that I've wanted to try for quite a while. And I think like really what influenced me to take this academic approach to writing the book, where there's the basic premise of the book. I should probably get into this before I say, yeah, it's very academic. But
Reminder for this episode.
the basic premise of the book is in the, well, let's call it the modern era, a historian discovers this centuries old manuscript that was hidden away in the archives of a grand library. That when he goes through these papers, he realizes that this is telling a story about this war that happened about 400 years prior, the details of which have always been kind of unclear, except for a couple details. Like there's one man who's been credited as kind of like the hero that stopped this massive intercontinental war, excuse me, from brought it to its conclusion. And where the name, Project Herodotus, where that comes from is Herodotus was an ancient Greek historian who has been called both the father of history but also the father of lies. And thematically, this kind of thing fits extremely well with this project, for reasons that will become clear, like once you get into the meat of the book.
Yeah.
So when I decided to take this academic approach, and it's something that you always want to continue to learn different approaches while you read. I think it's was it Stephen King? Stephen King, I believe, was one who said, to be a good reader, you gotta read a ton of books, or be a good writer, you have to be whatever order I should have said that in. You have to read a lot of books, and it was about, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago that I read Jonathan Strange and Mr. Gnarl by Susanna Clarke, and that book is kind of like a pastiche of Jane Austen era books, but it also has it's also framed as a scholarly study, because the premise of the book is basically the rediscovery of magic in 17th 18th century England.
Wow.
But there's a lot of footnotes scattered throughout the book, and there's this whole fictional oeuvre of arcane scholarship scattered throughout the book. And ever since I read that book, that approach is something that I've wanted to do specifically for this project. And it's given me the opportunity to finally put my history degrees to use in very exciting ways, because all those scholarly papers that I thought I was going to write 10 years ago, I finally get to do them, but in the context of a fictional world of my own creation. And there aren't going to be some ancient ass fuckers saying, "Hey, your research sucks." And it's "Hey, you're going to be dead in 5 minutes. I don't care. I don't care what you think."
Tell us how you really feel.
Yeah, that's kind of the premise right there. I don't remember what the original question
That's all right.
was that brought this up.
That's all right. We were talking about what it drives you to work on Project Herodotus.
Oh yeah. So yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah. That you get to use all of your history and say "F you" to old men.
Yeah, that's the American dream, isn't it?
Absolutely, I will stand by that.
Yeah, but yeah, no, it's it's a very exciting premise to get to tackle, and really kind of put this expertise that I spent 10 years of my life pursuing, that no, it doesn't exactly feel like it's going to waste anymore. I feel back in an element that I hadn't been back in quite a long time, and that alone is exciting in itself.
I can see how that would be very motivating. There are a lot of people that just, frankly, they have degrees that they just never touch anymore. That was actually something that was very inspiring for me to start this show. Actually, my original degree is in broadcast communications. I do nothing with that at work. I'm a software engineer now.
Yeah,
But
it's okay. I'm a patent manager. something went screwy in the timeline, but hey, we're where we are now, right?
But we're not in the darkest timeline. That's all I know for sure, because things would be much worse if we were. That's
This is
all I'm
true.
saying. Um, so you talk about, and you've talked about this previously before, every time you start a new book and a new project, you try something a little bit different with how you create that work of art. How does the process for writing your magnum opus differ from the other projects? Do you approach it with a different mindset? Is there like a different kind of discipline that it requires, or a creative strategy that you have to employ to tackle this massive undertaking?
So in a sense, my approach was kind of similar to when I outlined the Spellbinder series, in that I still was kind of like outlining the world a bit, but the world in the Spellbinder series is much more contained to just like one small island. So the world building there was a lot easier, a lot simpler to do in a sense. Even though like there was a lot that I was building within those small confines, like it still feels a little smaller in scope. With Herodotus, I still kind of took that approach, but kind of blew it up American extra large. And where like not only am I like kind of like just doing like what's happening in this world right now, I'm also creating these in-depth histories, like these uh like histories of entire kingdoms, of entire empires, dip, confines of different magic systems, different cultures, trying to establish like, different underlying conflicts between nations, trying to make different cultures feel distinct from one another, and make clear that kind of like the real world parallels are kind of like well researched and well implemented, that they feel natural to the world, while also not coming off as like a ham-fisted comparison to like a real world analog. Like if you're well versed in like different geographical history, like there will be like certain things that are familiar. Like I have one country that's very much influenced by like post revolution France, but like on the flip side, another country that's like influenced from like history of Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like creating like a full world that you have distinct cultures, you have distinct people, but at the same time doing more than just, well, they're just from somewhere else, and called it a day. You never want to like half-ass it that way. You always want to make sure everything feels like not necessarily different for the sake of being different, but also different for the sake of like it feeling like there's reason for there to be cultural differences, right?
Yeah.
So so like the approach stays the same, but it expands. So it's kind of taking what I've learned from previous attempts and just building more and more off that. Because really, like when you start out writing, you're starting a foundation, and what you build upon that foundation, or what you take off that foundation, you kind of learn along the way. And I feel like everything that I've kind of learned, what to include, what not to include over the last 5 years, it's just being stacked higher and higher on this foundation, and hoping it just doesn't topple on top of me.
Yeah, that would be bad, especially with a double extra large American sized story that you are creating. So, with the scope being so large for this project though, how do you manage it? How do you keep it from the complexity getting away from you in the world building? How do you track so much that is happening while continuing to progress the story?
I think there are two answers to that. One is having a good outline, because with something of a grand scope like this, And I'm not saying that there's like no value in like pantsing as a writing approach. Like for me, it doesn't work, but like for something of this scope, you need to have an idea of where you're going. Otherwise, you're just gonna get lost. You're gonna get stuck. There's gonna be Miranese knots that are difficult to untangle, and then you just kind of find yourself stuck. Knowing where you're going to go, even if not everything is fully outlined yet, having those broad strokes in mind for when you do actually get to that point where you outline what you're going to do next, you know where you're going, and you're not just kind of trying to draw blood from a stone and figuring out where to go. That's the first thing that I do. The second thing is you don't introduce the entire world all at once, like full go. Um, where this series goes, it's spread over 3 continents, but I'm basically splitting the series into 3 arcs. With there's going to be things happening on each continent in each arc, but primary focus is going to be like one continent per arc, and like there's going to be like other inciting things to carry forward into the next arcs, like happening in the background. So it's kind of like the slow introduction of everything that keeps it from being a little too overbearing. So it's kind of like leaving that breadcrumb trail that like when you actually fully get into a certain section of the book, it doesn't feel like you're being suddenly overwhelmed with everything. It allows you to kind of just gently ease not only the reader into it, but also you as the writer to just like get yourself into that world. And that's kind of what I've tried to do. Like with this first book, I have 6 primary POV characters in it. I don't even introduce 2 of them until part 2 of the book, because there are other things going on elsewhere that help better introduce the world. That once these characters are brought in, they kind of fit a little more seamlessly into what everything that's going on, because there's like different like political situations to consider for one character. There's the aspects of one of the magic systems to consider for the other character, where you see kind of like the with an earlier character, specifically for the magic system in question. Like for one character, you see kind of like the positive aspects of like this magic system, whereas with this character that gets introduced, you're seeing more the negative aspects. So it's you kind of want to just gently sprinkle things, lead things, especially with a large book. You want to kind of like not rush into things. You want to not necessarily meander, but kind of take those slow steps that you need to properly build everything up, because that eventually, when everything comes to a head, when everything finally clicks, it clicks that much better.
No, it sounds like you're inviting them to a very big meal, but they need to take it one bite at a time.
Yeah, and there are appetizers. I mean, yeah, like that steak is going to be great later, but I also love mozzarella sticks.
Oh, who doesn't?
And I mean that's a weird ass meal, but I don't care.
I'm here for it. We're going with these weird American analogies. This sounds like an American dinner right there. So, what are the biggest challenges that you are anticipating with working on this magnum opus? Like, is it the pressure of meeting expectations that you have set on yourself? Would you say it's like the scale of the story, or something else?
I feel something that pressure I feel is something that you always should feel as an author, because there's always the pressure to kind of succeed in each book that you write. And like when you don't, it kind of does deflate you a little bit. But with something like this scale, like there's definitely maybe added pressure, because it's almost like you're justifying why you're writing something this large to your audience. Yeah, and like expectations is definitely a big thing to consider because you want to, like I said, you want to justify the series being as large as it is to your audience.
Yeah.
But like once you have that justification in place, now you have that expectation that it's going to continue to be that same quality as the world gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So you have those expectations of wanting to match that quality consistently and not have it taper off and have it be completely worth it in the end. But then, which, you know, like, it adds to that pressure a bit, but then you kind of run the danger of maybe just because of how massive the scope is, if you get details mixed up in your head, suddenly you're retconning everything from a couple books back. And so it's like, you know, it's basically keeping thorough records for yourself down to like what color hair this character has or something like that becomes more and more crucial the more details you sprinkle into the world. So that's not something that it's not something I've ever done to this scale before. Like I've done it to varying degrees with Spellbinders and Dragons of Nara, but you know, like doing something on this scale, it's definitely a I don't want to say frightening thought, but it's definitely an anxious thought. It is, you know, just keeping all the details squared away in my own head and making sure that if I think something is important to bring up later, I jot it down.
Oh, that's a great idea. Like, there's a Matt Dinniman who's arguably continuing his magnum opus right now with Dungeon Crawler
Mhm.
Carl. He is actually a very avid pantser. He pantses his novels, but he also says that he pantses them, but he keeps very detailed notes of everything that he has said. Like, this is a fact, this is a thing. Like, even down to the inventory of all the characters, so that he can
Mhm.
just remember, like, oh yeah, I said they had this item. It's +10 to intelligence. It would be relevant to this situation.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, and that was like kind of something that we touched upon in the last episode with approaches to outlining and how, especially with like humorous writing, where some of that stuff just comes out more organically.
mhm.
Where like you're effectively pantsing right there. And I mean, Dungeon Crawler Carl, obviously, it's, you know, lit RPG, but it's a very funny
Oh,
series,
it's
and
hilarious.
I'm assuming that so much of that comes out organically from Matt. But again, a lot of it is plot relevant with you know, like their new achievements and
Oh
everything.
God, they're so funny.
And all the rewards and all that. So everything still has its plot relevance right there. Even the absolute shit post rewards that
Oh yeah.
that Matt eventually comes up with, like keeping thorough notes even for something that you're just saying for the hell of it. It's like it might be important later.
Yeah. That comment, like you said, we talked about it a little bit in the previous episode about how comedy and jokes in general kind of just need an organic space to grow. That just clicked something in my mind. That may explain why Brandon Sanderson's jokes sometimes just kind of fall flat in his stories. He is great at a lot of things in his writing.
Yep.
Unless it's fun
Humor is not one
related,
of
his
them.
humor is not one of them.
Yeah. The only one where book, like, and it's like such like just to go on this,
No,
continue on this
continue.
tangent for a minute.
We'll come back.
I feel like the the best one of Sanderson's books that kind of proves kind of like what is like almost like organic humor versus almost forced humor is Tress of the Emerald Sea, because that book is legitimately funny.
I will say it's the
That
funniest one he has.
like, and it, because it's such like a different approach to how he normally writes, because it's much more whimsical, it has much more Discworld air to it, but then but and like the narration is genuinely funny, but then how he does Hoyd in the book is just right back into like the forced Sanderson terrible humor, where the humor is basically just Hoyd says this random thing. Like he says, I don't know, I pooped my pants or something. I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't remember. But he just says weird shit like along those lines. And it's like, ha, see, that's funny. And it's like, sure, Brandon, I'm happy you're happy.
Yeah. Let's get back to
Congrats on your
the plot.
Kickstarter.
Yeah.
But um, but like, but yeah, it's like that same thing. It's like organic humor versus really what feels like planned humor. It's like Hoyd's here and he says something weird. It's like, whereas like this little whimsical tale of like this Princess Bride meets Discworld style of humor. It's like, oh, I'm genuinely laughing at a Sanderson book, and I did not expect that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my point on organic versus planned
No,
for
no, I think
humor.
you're right. It's something I haven't really thought about, because while I like to put humor in writing, it's not really the focus of the book that I'm writing right now. So it's not really something I've really delved or thought about a lot. But when you said that, it just clicked something into me that you really do just need that organic space. But
Right.
this episode is not about the humor. We're talking about magnum opuses, not opie still. For some reason, we're going to have to talk to somebody about that. Something I did want to ask you, though, is do you think an author's magnum opus can change? So, say you write Herodotus, this project, and you get through all 8 books, and it's everything that you wanted it to be. Could you then write another magnum opus? Would it take away the title from this other series, or is it something that you can spread across?
I feel like it could probably be something that you could spread across. I feel like um, feelings towards any one series like organically change
Hmm.
regardless. When I look back on the Spellbinder series, like when I released it, there was a lot of stuff in it that I really loved. Looking back on it, there's like I don't necessarily enjoy those things in the same way as I did a few years ago.
Yeah.
Um, and conceivably, like the same could happen with Herodotus. I could finish it and think it's like God's gift to man or whatever. However up my own ass I eventually get, who knows? But at the same time, I could also think, you know what, this was great, but maybe I could do better elsewhere. I could, or even you could just like shift genres. You could do like a fantasy magnum opus and then do like a sci-fi magnum opus or something like that.
That's true. I hadn't thought of that.
You could like wear a bunch of different hats. Like you could make like almost like branching stories within the world you already created. You could want to maybe never write ever again because you feel like you've done everything that you have to give. But I don't know. I feel like there's probably like no one correct answer to that. Like you can like if you feel that you have even more in the tank after you write something so like on such a huge scale, I feel like there's nothing stopping you from saying, yeah, I'll double down on this. I'll have another go at it. And if this is a new magnum opus, then let's see how it goes.
I will say I don't think a qualification for a magnum opus is like perfection. Um,
Mhm.
it's just something you were saying earlier. Like you can always improve. You can always do this part better or that part better, as opposed to what you did then. Even if you think it is God's gift to man when it first comes out. Um,
Mhm.
like I would probably say my favorite magnum opus is The Wheel of Time, and there's
Mhm.
plenty wrong with that series. I still love it. I still
Absolutely.
think it's amazing. The world building and the story itself is fantastic eventually, but
Yeah.
there is still plenty wrong with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, but even like those weaker books, like the slog books, like 7 through 10, like there's still some like there's still things that add to the world, even though the plot may only like go forward kicking and screaming
Yeah.
because something eventually had to happen.
Yeah.
Um, but it's definitely like one of those things that it's like a sum of its parts type of thing where on the individual book level, quality can vary wildly because you get like the highs of like Shadow Rising, Knife of Dreams, Memory of Light. You
Yeah.
get the highs of those, but then you get like the low lows of like Winter's Heart and Crossroads of Twilight. But like but on like the whole ride, like once you get to the end of it, there's like this was goddamn worth it, absolutely.
Absolutely. That's the feeling you have to get at the end of the Magnum Opus. Sorry about that, folks. We just had some technical difficulties on my end as my camera decided it was tired of our stuff. But we still want to talk about the Wheel of Time.
Yeah,
We'll try to pick up from where we just left off. Joe, do you remember where you were at?
I think we were shitting on the slog of the Wheel of Time, but
That is true. So the more I've thought about that, by the way, um, the reason I think there is a slog in the Wheel of Time is because you have all of these threads of a story that's going through the whole of the Wheel of Time. And the slog primarily happens when we start getting way too many of those. Too many of these side plot lines become the more important thing when every reader or most readers have been like, "Hey, I want to get back to that main plot. We're not there anymore. We're doing all this other stuff that doesn't feel relevant."
yeah,
That's what I think it happens from.
what Jordan wanted to do, I think like the scope expanded more and more beyond like what he was really prepared for. Because I think originally the Wheel of Time was only, I think it was originally supposed to be a trilogy. Then it was originally supposed to be 6 books, maybe. If
Oh
I have my
wow.
facts right, I very well could just be talking out of my ass. But like, and then obviously it became 14 books. I mean, even when
I had no idea.
Sanderson took over, uh, Memory of Light was just supposed to be
A
like
single book, right?
a single book, yeah, and it
Yeah.
became the 3 books that Sanderson wound up writing. So with magnum opuses, things can change, and like the scope, like scopes can expand, the world can grow bigger, and you just kind of have to roll with the punches and hope it just you can still stick to the plan.
Yeah. Well, like we were talking about earlier, like really the most important thing is sticking the landing, making it feel worth it at the end. And that was something Brandon Sanderson definitely did. And even Robert Jordan was like setting up very well before he passed away. Just this idea of like, hey, you can take me on this journey, just make the journey worth it.
And like Wheel of Time is definitely, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon type of book. Like the setup where it's, very Tolkien-esque, especially in Eye of the World, and then you kind of get more and more further from that until like around book 4 it like really becomes the Wheel of Time. And then, things just meander a bit, but like where they meander, where everything kind of falls back together, where Robert Jordan really felt like he was like coming back into it with Knife of Dreams before he passed away, and then the 3 books that Sanderson wrote. And like part of it was like pacing felt a little more accessible because different Sanderson writes differently from Jordan. He didn't want to emulate Jordan's style. Like the pieces were there for Jordan to stick the landing, and Sanderson just helped put those pieces together. And it was a really beautiful thing, like how it all came together, and such the point that the epilogue to Memory of Light that was solely written by Jordan. So we see that like he knew exactly where things were going to end. It's just it took a long time to get there, but it was still well worth the ride. And that's what you always want to aim for with these magnum opuses, I guess, is the moral of the story and how we came to it at the end of this
Yeah.
hour-long discussion of what even is a magnum opus.
Yeah. I actually do have one more question I want to ask you. And it's kind of poignant with what we're talking about with the Wheel of Time because it is just such an an emotional thing at the end of this massive series that you will be devoting years of your life to this. And so working on your magnum opus is a deeply personal thing. How do you manage the emotional weight of pouring so much of yourself into like a single work or a single series?
Yeah, I think there's like it's a combination of like you want to have so much of yourself put into it while at the same time trying to detach yourself from it when you're not able to work on it. So it's because these things, you know, like obviously they take time, they take up a large portion of, you know, like your life at that point, right? You almost kind of have to like shut yourself down when you need to, while also kind of similar to how you're kind of keeping pieces on the board to piece it all together. You're kind of leaving pieces of yourself on the table too when you need to pick them back up and put them back into this work. Eventually, it all comes together, and that part of you is always there. You know, like it's kind of like it's like a memory of light, I guess, to bring it back to Wheel of Time. I don't know.
No, I think that
There's
works.
like yeah, writing is always just like a memory of something, and memories don't go away, um, and memories last forever unless you're forgetful, which I am.
And that's why we write things down so that we
Yep.
can remember them.
We tried to go poignant, and then I'm just too tired for that.
It's all right. I think this is going to be about a good time to
Yeah,
cut to the
yeah.
end
I
of
need to
this
go to bed in
episode.
like an hour, so
Okay. Well, thank you for coming on to talk on this. With wow, see, I'm getting it as well. I'm going to redo that part. Thank you for coming on to the show today so that we could talk about magnum opuses. And why don't you tell the people where can they find you? Where can they find your books?
yeah. So you can find me on most social media platforms at Joe Lee __. I think on TikTok I'm Joseph John Lee. Sometimes I go onto TikTok and do weird videos when I'm feeling like it. All my books you can get on Amazon and wherever books are sold. Project Herodotus, my magnum opus, the first volume, I am planning a Kickstarter to launch it with hopefully by the end of this year, if not the beginning of next year. And then it should be available for all public consumption shortly after that.
That's fantastic. Thank you again for coming onto the show and dealing with the technical difficulties of this. But remember, folks, the journey from writer to author might be long, but until then, let's be author adjacent together. Have a good one, folks.
Bye.
Oh my God, we made it.
That was a journey.